Good morning. So delighted this morning to be joined by Julian Burnett. Julian, thank you. I'm really grateful to you for coming on and answering some questions this morning.
No, thanks for the opportunity to have this chat, Suzie. It's always a pleasure.
Fantastic. Before we go into the questions, I thought it'd be interesting for me just to give a quick intro and a background on your experience. And obviously, I know you're going to elaborate on that, but it was fascinating sort of looking back through your career. So you're a CTO really by background. You've held some huge roles, kind of C-suite roles with big brands, Sainsbury's, John Lewis, BT, BNP Paribas. It was rather lovely actually, sort of looking back through it all. And now you're doing these big, CEO, NED roles, and I would say a transformational growth expert, if that's a fair kind of cover or catch-all for kind of the work that you do. And you're really doing kind of serial interim roles now, aren't you? Doing these really big transformation projects. So a broad mix in that digital and technical technology leadership. But it would be really great for the audience, the incredible career to date. Would you mind just, bringing it to life for us to kind of a little bit about your career experience to date and, what's led you to where you are now?
Sure. Well, there's been quite a lot of it, Suzie. I've been at it for 30 odd years now, but I suppose what defines the common thread through all of this is I started my career in engineering, physical engineering, so mechanical engineering, and that has been I suppose a continuous thread through just what I engineer is bigger and more complicated, and it's now transformational business change that I'm typically involved in. But so I set out as an engineer, trained formally as an engineer, and started to get into the notion that actually the thing that defines business, well-engineered business, differentiated from not well-engineered business, and a lot of that is about adopting a mindset, adopting technology where it's appropriate. I moved in my early career into what I would describe as real-time environments, so demanding of the technologies and the data that they particularly defined by really high volumes of things and very high velocities of things. So telco. So I worked for BT on very large network optimization projects, and you can imagine, UK national network of BT is quite complicated. I then moved into corporate banking and investment banking, where I worked on real-time trading platforms and went all over the world, designing and implementing those for big banks. Again, sort of defined by really high volume and high velocity. So sort of got into the techniques and the technologies that you're required to use when you're in those environments. They're highly scalable, highly secure. There's a level of process optimization that's required. Lots and lots of complexity in the data that you're managing, and how that data sort of gives rise to the opportunity to innovate in the markets that we're in. So that came next. I then turned myself into a consultant over a period of 10 or more years, working with a number of consultancy businesses, where I was applying the learnings that I'd had from those early formative stages of my career to a much broader market area, and got involved in insurance and software development for insurance. I got involved in retail, logistics, but particularly, I suppose, came to the realization that the focus and priority for investment in transformative technologies goes hand in hand with this insatiable appetite for continuing to drive profit performance.
Yeah.
And what really, I suppose, got me intellectually interested in this was that, and I'd started to work more and more in and around the retail industry at this point, the sheer complexity that comes with being a very large, very fast-moving physical business where you're moving stuff around, you're working with a wide range of different supply relationships, physical relationships, digital relationships, international, geographic complexities involved, legislative change, consumers on one end. Just to give you an example, 22 million people cross the threshold of a Sainsbury's supermarket every week, and it's a huge number of visitors, and selling across a range of 50-odd thousand products in 1,500 stores. I mean, when you add up all of the complexity, you can realize that you can't actually do that without technology. And you can't make the experience that customers and colleagues and suppliers are having better without technology. You can't drive the efficiency of the processes and the optimization of your assets, your stock, your space, your labor, your distribution network. You can't do that without technology. And so I became really fascinated by the possibility of going working directly in retail. And I was hired as the first chief technology officer for Sainsbury's to go and sort of get into how do we transform this business towards becoming much more of a digitally and technology enabled one forever, rather than doing it sort of project by project by project or outsourcing it to a big IT services firm. Actually, how do we do this for ourselves? And so I did quite a number of those. I did it for Sainsbury's, I did it with John Lewis, I did it for House Fraser, always holding sort of very commercially focused CTO and CIO roles. Latterly within House Fraser, actually, when I was there, I held full P&L accountability for the really stepped into the organization to transform its fortunes. Some might say turn around its fortunes, because it was heading quite quickly to downwards. And then my last big corporate role was running IBM's business in the UK and serving our retail consumer products and logistics clients, of which there were around about 160. And that was across all of what IBM did for them. So hardware, software, consulting, strategy, transformation, outsourcing, it was $1 billion business that I ran for them for a while. But latterly, in the last few years, I've been focused on board level advisory, interim roles, alongside a portfolio of non-exec directorships and board advisory work into companies that I've also invested in. So I've got a range of investments in sort of disruptive technology and consumer products businesses as well. And whenever I'm not working on a project, I'm having all of my spare time taken by the founders of those businesses, which is it's nice to be able to do, you know.
So now you're doing those kind of non-exec and these CEO transformational roles. How do you approach those? Because that's quite different to some of the big corporate roles that you've had previously.
Yeah, I very different actually, and I think the defining difference is around that you're adding yourself to a business leadership team that's already pretty competent in what they're doing, but maybe not competent in where they're going. And I think, you know, my addition to a board, either as an advisor or as an interim, is largely focused upon the future and creating with the existing board and the executive team a way of, I suppose, articulating the vision and strategy and helping them through the strategic choices they need to make about where to go next.
Yeah.
If you're a PE business or if you're a founder-led business, the future holds a wide range of possibilities, you've got to make some choices and then get after them. And a lot of time it's around that first, getting a real sense of alignment. And when you work as an independent advisor, as I have been, it's really having the ability to speak truth to power, and being able to offer an evidence base to back up the independent recommendations I'm making, and then to bring some consensus about through the influence and alignment of often conflicting and competing interests at board level. There's not a board I've worked in or on where everybody is 100% aligned all the time.
How very true. It's a really timely comment, because we have, if I look at the live roles we've got at the moment and I look at what's driving those, it's around a period of transformation and change for the business.
Yeah.
And I think we're seeing more of that now in the last 6 months than we've seen for quite some time. It's been a big acceleration of that. And I look at your roles now, you're very much an expert in transformation and change, where there's a strong digital and technology focus. Right. What advice would you give to companies who know they need to embark on this process, and let's be blunt about it, possibly don't know how to approach it? What kind of guidance would you give to them as to how to go about it?
Yeah, don't rush.
Yeah.
Don't rush. Be very mindful of the winning formula of your business. In very big businesses, it's very easy to forget how to make money if you're in a particular function. But at the board, it's pretty typical that most people understand what the combination of brand, customer focus, market focus, product, capability, different. Where most boards will understand the winning formula of their business. You'd hope. But don't rush, because the thing that I've learned, I suppose, painfully and gainfully over my career, is that you can really only do so much at once. So don't rush. Don't try to do too much, and really focus on enhancing the performance of your winning formula, where you see opportunities first, risks second, and challenges third. If you go try fix problems, it's not transformational. It will ultimately, those problems will get swept up into a bigger scope of work that will be transformational. But if you can't kind of go and fix problems, it's distracting you from the opportunities that you have to really enhance the performance of your winning formula. What I'd say also is that digital and tech transformation is not a strategy in itself. It's a philosophy that can be applied to your business strategy. You don't need to do things digitally. It's a choice you're making because you've determined that being digitally enabled will give your colleagues, your suppliers, your customers a different experience, and through that experience, it will enhance the performance of your business. But digital transformation is not a strategy. It's a way of applying a particular philosophy to achieving an outcome. And I'd sort of hold that there are probably 3 or 4 broad levels where it's worth thinking about focusing your investment in that sense. And this for me is all about choice. It's all about making decisions through a framework that gives you the choices worth making.
Yeah.
Do the things that you have to do in business to manage the efficient and effective operation of those. Do it really well. There are plenty of technology platforms that allow you to do business basics really well, and just go with the flow on that. You've got to do it, so just go with it. But don't allow that to define where you go first. Really, for me, the focus of this is around the activities that are helping you differentiate yourself from your competition internally. The processes that are, you know, by dint of being a retailer or a telecoms provider, these are the things that are really about your ability to distinguish yourself operationally. But then thirdly, and I think where most of the last 15 years of my energy's been directed has been because those other two levels, they're sort of necessary but insufficient in my view. The third level is around what can you really do to enhance the experience of your customers, open up new market opportunity, create attraction to your brand, and maintain a level of continuous investment in that improving experience. And you know, that's where digital technology, digital thinking, data come to life in the relationship that your business has with your customers, the relationship that your business has with your colleagues and with your suppliers. And so it's been more around focusing on the surface area of the business rather than necessarily the foundations. But I think that the final point is that sometimes what you create is actually good enough to sell in its own right, and there are a number of companies I've worked with in the last few years where they've actually gone, hey, you know what? This in its own right could be placed in the hands of others so that they can use it, not customers. And suddenly they've gone, oh, we've just become a technology company. But it happens rarely. But if you're setting your stall out to the market with digital first engagement of your customers, sometimes the things you create actually have intrinsic value in their own right for others, for other companies.
You create an amazing asset then. That
you created something that's worth you. And you know, if you look at the history of software as a service companies, quite a few have come out of that through that route. They've been technologies built to provide to customers of a particular company, and then they've gone, oh, we could actually sell this to other companies to let them do that. But then finally on this point, I think, look, I'm a massive advocate of continuous investment and agile delivery, and not setting out a 3-year transformational roadmap that's got hundreds of millions of pounds worth of capital investment attached to it. That's called a vision, but actually the execution of that's better done in a more empowered agile model where, you know, you bring together small teams of people and get on with delivering towards an outcome, and the combination of those outcomes builds towards the vision. And as a software engineer and as an engineer generally, I've always lived in this world where doing things iteratively, doing things through the sort of well-engineered lens of architecture has been a better way of delivering transformational outcomes than doing big, long-running projects that tend to fail. They tend to fail because the world changed from the time that they were defined. You know, 3 years ago when we set out on this £100 million ERP replatforming project, the world was different. Well, perhaps you shouldn't be doing it then.
Is there a project that you would be able to share a bit like a case study, just to kind of give us an example as to, you know, because you've done some fascinating and very significant projects. Is there one of those that you might be able to talk through just to kind of bring it to life for us? Yeah,
for sure, of course. And there are many and various that I could talk to, Susie, and they've all been fascinating in their own right. I think even though the outcome ultimately for this business was a change of ownership, when I joined the executive team at House of Fraser, we'd just been acquired by a big Chinese conglomerate, and they'd invested heavily in the brand, but hadn't necessarily set out a plan of how they would realize a return on their investment. So they hired people like me to come and help them shape up what turned into a big turnaround. I call it a project, and I call it a project because I was hired on a 2-year basis, and I was there to do a defined thing fast. And so, with that outcome in mind, I set about a whole range of different things. But I arrived to a situation where 3 of my strategic technology partners were suing me.
Oh, I shouldn't laugh with that is quite funny.
And they were suing me for a variety of reasons, but it had become apparent that the relationship between the business and some of the strategic partners kind of broken down a bit. But one of the most fundamental outcomes that we were seeking was to become masters of our own destiny when it came to our online business. It was a £500 million revenue business, quite complex in its, but a large part of it was outsourced. We were using somebody else's technology, we were using somebody else's teams. We were not really in control, and the cost of it was really quite eye-watering. But it went hand in hand with a need to really take a long and hard look at the future trajectory we were on, and the provision particularly of our distribution and logistics operation, which in itself was becoming more expensive every time we sold something online. And so the combination of technology transformation and supply chain transformation came together under my leadership, and we delivered across the span of only 2 years in real terms, a re-insourcing of all of our technology. We put to bed all of those legal challenges, and we all sat around the table and got some of our big strategic partners back on side, and they helped us through what was a very very fast turnaround of technology capability building internally. So we went from no team to a team of around 80 odd digital experts internally. We delivered a whole range of projects within the overarching desire to re-platform our own online business, and went from an outsourced to an internal, but at the same time drove the supply chain transformation to coincide with it, because we were heading to a much bigger world from an online perspective than our supply chain partners could cope with. And we needed to consolidate around a much simpler model. Anyway, the combination of those things across the span of 2 years, we managed to deliver all of that and put an EBITDA improvement into the business as well, with a combination of sales and cost reduction. But the proud moment came when what we'd done became a platform upon which other brands could operate independently of us. And so we created something that allowed, in fact, and it's gone on into the Frasers Group model now, where they are buying brands and just dropping the brand onto the operating platforms that we created, physical and digital platforms. And so that was, it's quite good to see that the legacy lives on in a very positive way.
And very impressive that was delivered in, 2 years for that
2 and a
kind
bit
of
years,
is astonishing.
I was on holiday with my family over one weekend in Barcelona, and I had to stay up all night when all of these moves were being made, and all of the systems changes were being made, and all of the commercial arrangements were going into place. And I remember walking around Barcelona in the baking sun. My daughter just had surgery on her legs for a particular reason. We were, and yeah, Dad was constantly on the phone, but we still enjoyed the weekend.
Oh, it's the way it goes. But that's really impressive, and I think people listening who, like you, maybe have had some very, very big CTO roles, who now maybe want to transition to do more interim roles. How did you make that transition from what we're going to call, for the purpose of this, full-time, to doing interim portfolio work?
Well, look, I think it helped that I'd worked in consulting in my past career, so I kind of knew a little bit about how you need to put together a personal brand, have a personal proposition that's around what. So I've been in the past quite used to sort of articulating in a reasonably succinct way who I am, what I do, and why it's worth hiring me.
Yeah.
I think the other ingredient to this is sort of natural tendency to network. You know, if you're in the world as an interim, you've got to go find your own work. I mean, there's a lot of time spent developing relationships and building opportunities for yourself. The last 15 months, Suzie, as you know, I've spent working as an advisor to a private equity fund and as an advisor to one of the companies in that fund, and we developed over the course of 12 months a digital platform and the first product iteration on that. And then I held the position as an interim CEO there for a while we got things stabilized and launched. It takes time to develop the opportunities. The guidance I'd also give is that the tenure of your time is really important factor in how embedded you become in the business that you're working with. And you can deliver a high impact outcome quickly, but it's not weeks, it's months, it's normally many months to really get to a point where your advice, your recommendations, your leadership are trusted within the context of a board or an executive team where you're not a permanent member. And being accepted is an interesting concept for an interim, because you're there to bring influence. You're there to bring experience that is absent often in the rest of the team. But you are also sort of putting yourself into a team of people that are familiar with each other but not with you, and you're expecting them to sort of quickly listen, quickly absorb, and quickly be influenced by you. There's a lot of, I suppose, subtle communication skills, influencing styles, and a lot of talking that's required quite quickly to afford you that privilege. And it is a privilege. It's a privilege because you know you're coming to be a catalyst. You know you're going to add something that they don't necessarily have, and you hope to leave them in a better place. And you hope, therefore, really that you can be effective quickly, but it's not just about you, it's about them too. And so you've got to be really mindful of that. And I think the final point is running multiple engagements simultaneously. And I've run into this situation, I suppose, 3 or 4 times across the last 3 years. It doesn't really work that well. If you split your time, in the back end of last year, I was running 3 things simultaneously, including a really important digital product kickoff for Holland and Barrett. We did 3 months of really intensive work, but I'm only there a day or 2 a week. They're doing all the work, clearly, but I'm also in preparation to become the interim CEO of another client, and I'm advising the fund that owns that business. Doing all of those things together is quite challenging. And then I have a non-exec position, which in the same time frame required some really kind of rigorous attention of a statutory nature, which you can't avoid. If you're a non-exec director, you have fiduciary duties, and they transcend all else in the eyes of the law. At least you certainly do. So I think, be careful what you wish for in that sense. And really, I suppose the final point is that you are a guest at the table.
Yes, that's important to remember that.
Yeah, and sometimes you'll have a lovely meal together, but it does come to an end, and it doesn't come to an end for them. It comes to an end for you, and there is an emotional dimension to being an interim. there's a humility required. There's also an acceptance that it won't be forever, and that you will create something with a group of people and they will go on, but you won't. And that sometimes can be quite emotionally difficult to extract yourself from and go on and do something else.
That's a really good point. I think the humility is interesting as well, because, you know, when we're looking for candidates for these kind of roles, clearly you're looking for people who are going to add immense value, and typically fairly quickly.
Yeah.
But you're looking for people who are humble. I mean, clearly these are incredibly senior leaders with an immense amount of experience, but it's that humble and humility that makes it work in terms of the interpersonal dynamics, and that's really important.
It is probably the most important thing, you know, being able to step into a group of people who are all, you know, significantly successful in their own right, experts in their own field, and their boss has just asked for this extra person to arrive. The dynamics can be quite difficult to manage sometimes. So you do need to go with that sensitivity, that level of sort of humility, and being able to engage in a really helpful and supportive way, whilst also trying to corral everybody through influence towards at least alignment on vision and outcomes, so that we can get going on doing this thing that's hard and fast. And often it is hard, and often it's required fast.
So true, so true. So what do the next few years hold for you? What have you got planned next?
Well, I've absolutely loved and enjoyed the variety and challenge of the things I've done. Where I suppose I work best, Susie, is in longer term interim roles that sort of allow me to take quite a broad transformational goal, develop the strategy with my colleagues, and then play a part in leading and supporting the change over a defined period. I'd imagine I've still got several of those kind of engagements left in me before perhaps I might wander off more fully into a portfolio career. But what's next for me is to find those kind of opportunities where there's already a recognition that a transformational impulse is required. I suppose if there was a word that encapsulates what I am and what I do, I am an impulse. I come and bring the sort of, right, let's take this idea and do something with it, or let's take this opportunity and really focus our energy on opening it up, or take this challenge, or combination of those things, and really bring about the crystallization of a strategy that we can execute. Often I enter businesses at a time when they've got that recognition, but they haven't really got the momentum behind delivering something tangible. They know they need to, but they haven't just crystallized it into an actionable set of moves and then built the momentum to deliver it. And in very big business, you can understand there's a lot of inertia. Takes a long time to turn an oil tanker. And so often my lasting legacy in these businesses, and suppose this is really where the next opportunity for me will lie, is about helping an organization build its own competence, its own capability, but most of all, its own confidence in being a business that's capable of continuous digitally enabled transformation. And oftentimes I arrive and that's not the case. They've got an idea, they know it requires investments in digital and technology, but they don't realize that being the owner of that capability is a better thing to be long term, so that they can react and respond to the markets that they serve, the customers that they engage, the suppliers, the colleagues. Actually being able to be a digital business is as much about having a digital mindset and a digital capability that's internal, always hiring big systems integrators or big consultancies to do it for you leaves you in no better a place with your own capability, ultimately. And so I'm all about helping businesses be self-sufficient and self-sustaining in the capabilities that they have to deliver this continuous digitally enabled transformation opportunity that they're after.
Thank you for that. And just really to sort of finish off today with the question. So we've placed you previously in an interim CTO role. And I just thought it'd be helpful for people listening who might be thinking of doing maybe their first interim role or thinking of working with us. Would you mind sharing a bit more about your experience of that?
Well, it's been hugely positive, Suzie. As you know, I think there's a distinction between what you do and what others do, and I think it comes in three forms. One, I think we first encountered each other in a community lunch that you put on to bring together, and that's great. I mean, it being an interim and being an independent advisor is sometimes a lonely place. You know, you don't have a home in terms of company, so that's always fantastic. You're definitely, as an organization, you're engaged at the right level. For me, I work with chairmen, with CEOs, with executive leadership teams, and you've got those relationships. I think also my experience was that in shaping the work that I did with Sigma Sports, which was the project that you refer to, we worked on that together in securing the opportunity with both the chairman and the CEO. We shaped it as a piece of work together, and it was a collaborative approach. It wasn't just you've got these skills, they need them, off you go. It was we went through the process of shaping that work together, and I really appreciated that because, again, if you're trying to find work, win work, and do work all at once as an interim, it's really helpful to have an organization and a person like you, Suzie, actually, that can work on that with you. And throughout, it wasn't just at the beginning, it was throughout. I mean, we worked together on this, and I really appreciated it.
Well, thank you. And I would say likewise, and we do find that, particularly when it's the interim CTO roles, that the client knows what the end goal looks like, but doesn't always know what that journey and the various kind of stages are they need to go to get there. And that's what worked so well, because you were able to help really advise, and to your point, kind of shape that. And we see that a lot, and it's having that relationship with our candidates where we can do that at this kind of C-suite level. It's having that open relationship where we can work together as partners, ultimately to give the client what they're looking for. Then everybody wins. And I'm really grateful to you. I'm really grateful to you for that, and I hope we placed you again. Julian, thank you. Absolute joy to be able to spend the time kind of catching up with you. Some brilliant answers there. I think that will help anyone who's either wondering how they make that transition from sort of permanent to interim, how the advice that you gave in terms of how they approach it with companies and what they do. And it's that humility is a really interesting thing for kind of people to be aware of. But thank you, extremely grateful to you.
You're very welcome, Suzie. It's always a pleasure, and I look forward to working with you again.
Excellent.